In today's episode, I'll share with you my journey with reading, along with some experiences I've gained that have helped me read more effectively. For me, books have always been a huge source of joy in life. I've been passionate about reading since I was young, and I'd even say that much of what I've achieved today in terms of work, knowledge, and thinking can be largely attributed to reading. However, my reading journey hasn't been without mistakes, and I'll be sharing those with you today in the hopes that you can avoid them and make your reading experience more efficient and enjoyable. I divide my reading journey into several phases. The first phase was when I simply picked up any book and read it cover to cover without doing anything afterward. Since I was young at the time, most of the books I read were fiction, like Robinson Crusoe, or adventure books like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Around the World in 80 Days. With those books, reading mindlessly wasn't much of an issue. However, as I grew older and started reading more nonfiction books, specialized books, professional skills books, I realized that this reading style led to knowledge slipping away quickly. I'd remember a lot right after finishing a book, but after a few weeks, I'd forget almost everything, retaining only about 20 to 30%. And because of this, whenever I encountered an issue related to something I'd read, I could only vaguely recall that I had read about it somewhere, but finding it again became a challenge. That's when I transitioned to my second phase, reading while taking notes. In this phase, all you need is a pencil, or, better yet, a highlighter. The advantage here is that every time you need to revisit a book or search for specific information, the important points are already noted, making it easier to reference. Additionally, it helped me develop a crucial habit, reading while paying attention. Before, I would sometimes find myself reading just for the sake of it, where words would pass in front of me but nothing would stick. This habit of highlighting helped me focus, which in turn improved my retention. With this new habit, the amount of knowledge I retained doubled to around 40%. But even then, 40% is still quite low. After all, imagine spending time reading a book and only retaining 40% of its content. What a waste. That was when I entered my third phase, discovering the Kindle. I remember it was around 2007 or 2008 when Amazon released the first Kindle. For those unfamiliar, Kindle is an e-reader. Its screen uses electronic ink, so it feels almost like reading on paper, without the eye strain of an LCD screen like on a phone or tablet. Moreover, when you highlight something on a Kindle, it saves all your highlights in one place, making them easy to access. I loved it because it solved my need for easy reference. This was also the time when I discovered minimalism, a lifestyle that has had a very positive impact on my life. I'll share more about this topic in another episode. Since then, I've almost completely switched to using a Kindle, and I rarely buy physical books anymore, only for gifting or when they're given to me. Discovering the Kindle marked my third phase, but it also led me to Audible, marking my fourth phase. In a later version, Amazon introduced a feature called Whisper Sync, which syncs the book you're reading with an audiobook service called Audible. This was the first time I learned about Audible, and I loved it because it was an audiobook format where the book is read to you. Audible completely changed the way I consumed knowledge. With Audible, I could listen while driving, walking, jogging, or even eating, just like the podcast format you're listening to now. It was also around this time that I moved to Australia, and in Sydney, most people commute by public transport, rarely driving to work. Since the city is so large, it's common to spend 20 to 30 minutes on the train going from home to the office, sometimes even longer. During this time, most of the books I consumed were on Audible, and I listened to a lot. This period was almost the opposite of what came before. It marked the moment when I decided to prioritize quality over quantity in my reading. I sat down and developed an effective reading strategy. Although it's a bit more time-consuming, it's significantly more efficient. At first, I still used Audible, but from this point forward, it was just a tool to quickly scan through books. Audible helps me read fast, allowing me to quickly grasp the content and determine if a book is worth reading. As I mentioned earlier, finding good books is crucial because reading the wrong ones can be worse than not reading at all. Not only does it waste time, but it can also, over time, sap your motivation to read. Once I've determined that a book is worth it, I reread it using Kindle. During this second pass, I take notes and found a way to sync those notes from Kindle to Evernote, back then. Eventually, I transitioned from Evernote to Notion. For those unfamiliar, Evernote is a note-taking app where I kept a folder containing notes from all the books I read. From time to time, I'd revisit these notes, which helped me retain important ideas. After a while, though, I realized this method was still quite passive. I had to actively seek out the information. I wanted the information to come to me. So, after searching online, I found a doctor in the UK named Ailey who shared my love for reading and efficiency. Through him, I discovered Readwise, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. Readwise connects to my Kindle, syncs all my notes to a server, and sends me daily emails with random highlights I've made. This method ensures my notes don't get lost, as Readwise brings them back to me regularly. What's funny is that often, those emailed notes coincidentally align with issues I'm dealing with on that particular day. Another advantage of Readwise is that it syncs directly with Notion, which has now become my personal database. It organizes all my notes neatly in Notion. For anyone using Kindle, I highly recommend giving Readwise a try. I'll leave a sign-up link in the description for those interested. If you've followed my methods so far, I guarantee that your knowledge intake will increase by at least 50 to 60%. With just a few simple setups, you can now absorb 3 times the amount of knowledge you did before. Now, I want to introduce the next phase, which has been the most beneficial to me. If possible, I strongly encourage you to strive to reach this stage. While the steps I've shared so far are effective, they only need to be set up once, like syncing Kindle, Readwise, and Notion. Once that's done, everything runs automatically. But the next step involves more effort. You'll need to sit down and work a bit. The habit I suggest you develop is summarizing the key points of each book using mind maps in your own words. If you're unfamiliar with mind mapping, you can find many tools online to help. Even if you don't use mind maps, you can summarize books in any format you like. At some point, I'll create a podcast on how to use mind maps effectively. Over time, this process has helped me create mind maps for most of my favorite books. Even books I read long ago are now getting mind maps. Though this method is simple, it's incredibly effective. I'm confident that using this approach will help you retain about 70 to 80% of a book's content, with only around 20 to 30% slipping away. The next 2 steps are more advanced, and I'm still in the process of turning them into habits myself. The first step is to add a personal reflection section to the mind map, where I note my thoughts, agreements, disagreements, and ideas for applying what I've learned in my daily life. By capturing these reflections in my own words, they stay with me much longer. Each time I revisit a book, combining my personal reflections with the mind maps, I can recall almost everything I initially learned. This is my current phase, and I'm working to make it a regular habit. Whenever I finish a book, or even while I'm reading, I immediately start writing down these reflections. For me, writing comes naturally, as I always have thoughts running through my head when reading. But I understand some may not enjoy writing. Regardless, I encourage everyone to try. Whether you write well or not doesn't matter because it's for you. The important thing is that it's in your voice and style, which makes the process incredibly effective for retention. Now, I'm going to share with you the final step. To be honest with you, I've only just started implementing this myself. However, from what I've learned from those who've been doing it for years, they all say that this step is incredibly worthwhile. Even though I've only recently started it, I've already sensed that it will provide great value for me in the future. Here's how it works. Everything I've shared with you so far, I've been doing for years. Over time, I've accumulated quite a large collection of highlights, knowledge from books, and life experiences. It's like I have a pile of bricks. Now, in this step, I'm going to use all these bricks to build a house with all the rooms I need. Specifically, I'm going to create something like a personal wiki page. I'm using Notion because it allows me to link pages together. Inside, I organize all these bricks into different aspects of life. For example, I have sections for professional experiences, communication skills, life skills, and many other areas related to my life. Each section has sub-pages, and each topic links to notes or references I've gathered over time. By doing this, I'll eventually have a place where all my experiences, lessons, and insights are organized in a structured way, making it easily accessible. In a way, it's like creating my personal library or life manual. I believe this will bring me immense value in the future. So, I've shared with you my journey of reading books, from the early days when I just read without taking notes, to the period when Audible consumed me, reading over 100 books a year but losing a lot of it, and finally to the present, where I focus more on quality over quantity. Some of you might be thinking, why make reading so complicated? Just enjoy the book. But trust me, you need to do this. If you just read without any method, it's a waste, and wasting knowledge is a shame. Looking back, I honestly wish someone had shared this with me earlier. By now, the amount of knowledge I would have gained would be much greater. I also want to clarify that the methods I've shared are mainly for nonfiction or specialized books. If you're reading fiction for entertainment, feel free to just relax and enjoy the story. But that being said, I believe that even fiction contains valuable lessons we can apply in life and work. I hope that through this episode, one that's admittedly quite long, I've provided you with more effective reading methods, or at the very least, inspired you to read more, because reading truly is beneficial. I'll end this episode here. Thank you for listening. If you found what I shared useful, please share it with your friends and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I'll see you in the next episode.